We got to a certain revenue level with sort of the money we raised. And then, 2022 happened. It became much harder to raise money.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just sort of raise money and buy businesses, raise money and buy businesses.
Oh, the market was telling us, guys, stop buying, figure out how to grow. And that's where you saw the things that we were doing here at Startwell, right? We leaned in and we set up a direct sales force. We said, look, we're going to go out and we're going to sell sellers directly. Let's set up a direct sales force. Let's go out and, show up at every event and try to sell people, right? And so we went out and, made a big stink in the Amazon seller community and started selling people at conferences and events and winning over influencers. And third, we took a real hard look at ourselves and we said, all right, well, what are you really good at? What can wait for the future, right? We want to go out and buy everything, but it can't all happen today.
Founded in 2017, Startwell is Toronto's independent hub for innovators to collaborate. Our podcasts relate perspectives from the world's most diverse urban population to reflect unique insights into global business, media, and culture.
Hey.
Back once again, 2 years later.
2 years later.
I can't believe it's been 2 years because that doesn't sound like it's very long when I say it. But man, what a 2 years it's been, right?
It has indeed.
Like every year is a decade these days.
Totally.
We thought that
especially when you're running a startup. It's it's a long time.
Honestly, but you know what's funny? I've been thinking about this lately, right? I just had this epiphanous moment yesterday where I realized, wow, man, we say startup a lot, right? Like people use that word. But the truth of the matter is any new co is a startup until what point, Like for the most part, every company is a startup unless you're I don't know, a dinosaur.
Go straight from startup to dinosaur.
Well, the thing is, because we're in this reality today where, that growth to exit kind of reality is sort of, at least in North America, a misnomer. You can M&A your way into oblivion, or public market your way into oblivion, where I'm not talking about every company, but the majority. If you look at I think the stats this year on the TSX is there's more delistings with companies being taken private off the public market than the other way around.
Yeah.
And there's that whole question of ultimately where do unicorns live? And is there a stable for them anymore? Or do they just get taken out, and their horns are shaved off and then they're just the beautiful horse in the back of the private equity stable. But anyway, that's not what this podcast is all about. We might get there. I don't know. Welcome back to the podcast. And
thank you. Thanks for having us.
To start well, guys, because you've been off campus for a little while.
Yeah, I was still remember. I think a little bit over 2 years ago. Not only were we in this podcast, we were in the space.
Yeah.
Two of us had started as sort of in the small room here, and it's been a long journey since then.
Let's do the catch up by looking at what was the original intention for the company, right? Because if for all our audience, also you can go back, you can find the episode that we did 2 years ago. Yeah. The room looks different, and you guys look maybe a little bit more haggard back then, a little bit more tired, and
Well, Kazi's the only person who's reverse aged.
Yeah, right.
The guy had a beard and long hair, and I'm looking at this image of this video. Hold up. I on the other hand, I was sleeping very well. I didn't have any kids back then, so I have a little one at home now. I feel like it's a different journey now.
Right,
he's being used to all these things.
There's a reason I look different. So I used to have a beard back then, but the problem is over the last 2 years, my entire beard turned white, and so I had to shave it off because didn't want to go around with a white beard. But doing a startup ages you.
It does it. Look at my hair, man. This is just since 2020. I didn't have any white hair going into the pandemic. I'll tell you that.
There you go.
But yeah, it's great, man. It's good to see you guys.
Well, seeing you too, man.
And back then, I guess, if I recall correctly, right, the mandate for Carbon6, what you guys were trying to put together was a toolkit for Amazon sellers built out of softwares that people had already kind of launched to market. And your goal was to go out there, buy them, and amalgamate them into a suite that would be the best tool set for any Amazon seller to use for everything that they need to do that the platform doesn't offer them.
Yeah,
totally.
Okay. So I guess how did things get going in
Yeah.
those early days as you grew your team here at Startwell? Let's
Yeah.
start with that picture. Thinking back,
Yeah.
what were those first few steps for you guys? And what did it feel like also? Like, what was it jubilant? Was it exciting? Or were you guys stressed? Because it seemed like a mixture of both.
It's always a mixture of everything, right? And there's a reason they call startups roller coasters. Like sometimes it's jubilant, sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's a bit of both. Thinking back to just a little bit of recap from the last time, right? The mission is exactly this as you called it, right? What we were doing was putting together the different software solutions that Amazon sellers and marketplace sellers generally needed to run their business.
Yeah.
We talk about sort of how the history of how we got together and started in the last episode. So I won't repeat all of that.
Yeah.
But broadly, what we were looking at is there was this big fragmented ecosystem of software tools
Right.
that supported the Amazon sellers and the marketplace sellers to run their business. The same way we use Zoom and DocuSign, DocSend, and all these different softwares to run our business.
Mm-hmm.
If you run a business in Amazon or in e-commerce, you need a lot of different software.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of these point solutions. What we wanted to do was simplify the life of a Amazon seller, a marketplace seller, and bring some of them together. And that's still what we do, and that's still core to our mission. That's still the customer that we serve. That's still sort of been our focus.
There's a but coming.
I think the main difference, if I reflect on what we were doing 2 years ago versus say today.
Right.
2 years ago when we were here, I think I would say 80-90% of our focus was M&A, like acquiring
Getting the
existing
new
businesses.
tools.
To product that software that was already established in market.
Yeah.
Had a founder sort of gotten to a certain level of scale, buying it, bringing it into the Carbon6 ecosystem, and then sort of putting it together into the suite. The concept of bringing these software solutions that did different jobs for our customers and bringing them is still the same.
Right.
I think what's been interesting, really over the last 18 months, and you will have seen a bit of this, we were growing our sales team up here and we were growing our marketing up here and so on, is really becoming more of a one company, one Carbon6.
Okay.
So, we've done some more acquisitions since that last podcast. We still plan to do going forward.
To date, how many do you think you've done?
Too many.
Yeah. It's probably, I think.
Little rocket internet going on over
a
here.
little bit. I think about I don't remember the number, about 12 to 14 or so.
Okay.
But smaller. But a lot of those were probably in the first half of being Carbon6. For the last sort of little while, we've actually focused on really the consolidation of these businesses and building out the Carbon6 organization so that we can go out to our customers as one Carbon6.
Yep.
I was saying like a Carbon6 salesperson, a Carbon6 customer success manager. When a customer interacts with any of the Carbon6 products, they're interacting with Carbon6. They have a whether it's sort of organizationally, whether it's through the technology and single sign-on and single sign-up and unified billing and so on, really consolidating them and going out to market as a product suite versus, as individual sort of separate businesses has been really the big focus for sort of the last little bit. And that's how sort of the team in Toronto has grown. And
because you were saying before we jumped in here that there's 140 people in total?
Yeah.
Like
With the bulk of them, 100 of them in Toronto,
Something
or
close to it,
90 of them or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Man. Okay, so this is super interesting. And for anyone who's in the audience kind of thinking about growing their company and growing through acquisition, I think there's a lot of wealth of knowledge at this table that we need to dig into a bit. Because if you did 14 acquisitions, and I'm sure the range of those... Okay, well, let's back up a bit. In buying these tools, if there's a prototypical kind of identity to the founder of this sort of a software tool, it seems to me as the sort of solopreneur, maybe he was a seller or she was a seller, and they were like, this problem really sucks and I need to fix it. They get it fixed and they're like, well, other people need it. And they all kind of Well, is that the commonality between most of the things that you've been buying?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
So most of the early acquisitions we did were individual point solutions, right? So, Kazi was speaking to some of the various jobs, right, that a seller would need to perform.
Yeah.
Typically what we were finding was that there were people that built solutions for a given individual job and then rallied people around to get customers into that particular tool and reached a certain cap. And so many of the early solutions we purchased were those types of point solutions.
Yeah.
As we've gotten to know the market better, I wouldn't say that there are a huge swath of solutions that are at larger scale that are, bigger, more sustainable kind of enterprises, but they're a great number, right, of double-digit million ARR companies in our space that have, the full suite of SaaS capabilities. Not necessarily competitors, but companies that we could look at from an M&A perspective or a partnership perspective.
Okay.
Because when we think about what we have, so we've put together many of the jobs, I'd say the majority of the jobs that you need to successfully sell on Amazon. There are still a couple that we haven't brought into our ecosystem.
Like in terms of function, what would be examples of stuff that's not part of your suite?
So, for example, we can do things like inventory forecasting, advertising, etc. We've never built a pricing solution, right? So, a key part of operating
market analysis, insights.
Repricing, for example, like if you are, it definitely borrows some of those pieces, and it kind of will need to help you forecast and figure out how to price relative to competitors, relative to your inventory levels, to understand exactly the optimal level to maximize your profits.
So as you had your initial kind of hypothesis, and you went out looking for things that existed to harmonize, right, to bring under the umbrella before you integrate them. What has changed along this path? It's actually not been that long, a couple of years, but like along this path, as you've acquired both software and the people that steward those software, right, to try and kind of build your team out of the founder teams of these companies. Let's talk about the insight into what the product should be as you build out its functionality through this acquisition, and how that story has changed. Like, how's your perspective as a founding team on what the suite should offer the customer changed through the acquisitions? Have you been learning through the acquisitions about the customer story?
Very much so. So I'd say, like, Kazi and I were kind of laughing on the way in. Like, we were speaking to you about things like Merch by Amazon the last time we were here.
Yeah.
And look, Merch by Amazon is a real thing. Like, people do
Amazon
print on
Basics.
demand.
I see what you mean.
Print on demand types of t-shirts, right?
Yeah, or books, right?
Or
Coloring books.
Coloring books.
Yeah, right.
There you go. Exactly.
Mugs, like, all sorts of branded stuff that can be created. But this is a tiny subsection of the market. And the reason we were talking about things like that was, we had a certain amount of capital to deploy, and we were able to buy leading tools in some of the smaller segments early, which helped us create momentum to segue into the larger segment of the market, right? But if you think about Amazon's sales, $730 billion is sold on Amazon per year.
By Walmart.
What's
or
that?
whatever. Like big retailers and big brands.
Yeah, but a third
making
of
the bulk.
Well, funnily enough, like about a third of that comes from 1P, which is so first-party sales on Amazon. So this would be like your Unilevers, your Procter & Gamble's, right? Your kind of bigger players. 2/3 comes from private sellers.
Okay.
Now, those could be individuals like you or me that just set up our own little businesses. They could be businesses that are, larger scale direct-to-consumer brands that have come into Amazon. There's also some interplay between the first-party and third-party channels where, some brands are seeking greater control over things like pricing, and they want to sell third-party for certain SKUs, right? But 2/3 of Amazon sales actually come from the third-party seller channel. And we spent the bulk of our early time, after the last time we sat with you, leaning in on that segment of the market and saying, well, what are the tooling? What's the tooling that third-party sellers require today? Where is demand being driven in that market? Right? It used to be that everybody wanted to sell online. It still is the case that everybody wants to sell online. Right? There's millions of people that are trying to sell online. A couple million get to an active listing on Amazon, but it's like a couple 100,000 that drive over 80% of Amazon sales. That's something like 10,000 touch points that drive about 50% of sales, right? And so what we were thinking about was, for the 10,000, for the 100,000, right? A couple 100,000, what are the different types of tooling that those buyers require? How is that different from the every seller? Where are the tools, the majority of tools in the market, who are they catered for? How do we lean in knowing that this market is both growing and consolidating, and provide the right set of tooling for the future mid-sized businesses, right? The businesses that are scaling up to start, really driving the bulk of the sales in that marketplace.
Yeah. And so one story is like support the sellers, but another story is facilitate their growth.
Big time. Right.
Yeah, it's both, right? As you become sort of a larger seller and sort of you, professionalize your organization, let's say, the complexity increases.
Right.
There's a lot more to manage. You have more products. It's not just a single product. You may have 100. You may have 10,000 products selling on Amazon. You need to manage all of their inventory. You need to forecast their inventory. You need to make sure you're shipping the right amounts. Make sure you're getting paid the right amounts. Make sure you're managing returns. The complexity of the business increases a lot, and that's where we wanted to hone in on.
Right.
And I think Nassim mentioned. I would say it's sort of really the big shift in thinking. To your point, is really focusing in on the customer that we serve and how we can best serve them.
Yeah.
So it was less about, okay, there's an Amazon ecosystem, there's all these products, and let's get these products. It's about, okay, who is our customer? What is it that makes their life difficult every single day? And what can we do to do it better?
Yep.
And it is, they have all these jobs, and we could either have a product ourselves to support them. If it doesn't exist in the market, we could build it.
Right.
And if it's something that we can't buy or build, we partner with other companies, because what we want to do is make sure the customers that we serve get simplify their life essentially, because it's becoming more and more complex every day to be an e-commerce merchant.
So let's talk about the business. When you were getting started, it was a mixture of equity and debt that was helping fuel these acquisitions, right?
Yep.
And then I'm sure you were onboarding revenue through them as well. So how has the money story evolved for the company?
So, equity and debt did fund the acquisitions, and that's sort of what funded the acquisitions. And, what's interesting is, we grew initially through acquisitions.
Yeah.
We got to a certain revenue level with sort of the money we raised. And then, 2022 happened. It became much harder to raise money.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just sort of raise money and buy businesses, raise money and buy businesses. And so since then, actually, we've basically been driven by revenue and growth.
Wow.
We actually have, I was thinking about sort of when we did our last podcast, we're, I think, 7x the size of that today from a revenue perspective, with not many acquisitions in between. So we've just sort of grown organically by serving our customers better and getting new customers in.
How much of that, though, is leveraging the client base from the disparate,
Some of it. Some
tools.
of it is the cross-sell and upsell, hey, use our inventory forecasting, check out our off advertising solution. Some of it is that. But we've also 3x'd the number of customers we have, 3x, 4x the number of customers that we have, just by bringing in additional customers, by providing them the unique value proposition that Carbon6 does, by providing a platform solution versus individual point solutions.
And along this timeline, just the last couple of years, how has the Amazon seller kind of user base, the actual merchant population, grown?
Yes, it's continued to grow every year.
Right.
So Amazon has had a fairly steady rate of growth. I think the number that I was probably throwing out when we were here a couple of years ago was that there was something north of half a trillion in sales, so something north of $500 billion sold on Amazon per year. Now I just mentioned the number 730 billion. I think we'll be at 800 billion next year. So there's a steady growth in the size of Amazon.
Dollars, yeah.
Sure,
Dollars
but
sold.
that, I mean,
Now that
how many people, make up for that?
so there's still solid seven figures number of people. What you are seeing is a slightly consolidating base, right? So there are there are bigger and bigger players in the market, but you're still seeing a pretty large volume of players in the market. The seller, I think there was this kind of interesting thing that happened like through COVID, right? Where there was like, if you look at all the long-term trends in e-commerce, they've kind of gone like this, right? And then in COVID, they did this, and then there was a kind of reduction, and then they started going back up again. And so when you take a look at where 2024 is relative to forecasts from 5 years ago, it's right on point or, a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at the curve, it kind of looks a little different because so much was front-loaded with COVID. So what ended up happening in the seller channel was you had all these sellers see huge success. Then, the same correction that Kazi was speaking about in the markets, for SaaS companies like us, was being faced by our customers, right? So they're experiencing real challenges that following year. And they look, if you're running an e-commerce business, you're having to, think about things like inventory, right? And so you're sitting with inventory on hand. It's your inventory turns are going a lot more slowly, right? This is costing you a ton of money, right? These are tough working capital businesses to manage, right? And so you're under fire, even if you're actually driving reasonable sales. If you've driven that much more because of the COVID spike the year before, you're facing real challenges in your business, right?
Yeah.
And so there were real challenges in 2022, 2023 that our customers needed to work themselves through to get themselves to being in a better spot. And so I think that, the long-term view is very, very strong. The last couple of years have been a thing to work through for everybody. Like, Kazi mentioned our challenges. Like, we were buying these businesses. We had a vision that we were going to be able to do everything Kazi said. But really it was a vision. Like when we were talking to you before, it was really like these guys had a dream and we were going to go out and execute. And the reality was we were buying these flat revenue businesses. And so we go out to market in 2022 and we're starting to talk to funds and they're saying, okay, so you've gone from this to this revenue in, no time in a year. That's amazing. How much of it's organic? And we say zero. Right. And then obviously we try to package that up in a nice story for the investors, but everyone would look at that in 2022 and say, that's a story that worked in 2021. It's no longer working today, right? And so it wasn't like we said we had this big epiphany that we had to grow, and the market was telling us, guys, stop buying, figure out how to grow.
Sure.
And that's where you saw the things that we were doing here at Startwell, right? We leaned in and we set up a direct sales force. We said, look, we're going to go out and we're going to sell sellers directly. Let's set up a direct sales force. Let's go out and show up at every event and try to sell people, right? And so we went out and, made a big stink in the Amazon seller community and started selling people at conferences and events and winning over influencers. And third, we took a real hard look at ourselves and we said, all right, well, what are you really good at? What can wait for the future, right? Like we want to go out and buy everything, but it can't all happen today. So let's just go and partner with some other companies in the space. And I think partnerships ended up unlocking a lot of opportunity for us too, because everybody was facing challenges in 2022. Right. And so when we were going out and setting up some of these strategic partnerships, if we weren't building market research, right, and keyword research, we went and set up a partnership with Jungle Scout, which is another software company in our space, right, or with Profitero, another software company in our space. And so we were able to drive a lot of growth by working and collaborating with others. And I don't think we ever came in thinking that was going to be a huge part of the vision, but I think it ending up building out a partner ecosystem became a huge part of what we did too.
Did you find with your original positioning, I know all this has happened pretty quick, but with your original positioning, did you find pushback when then trying to, kind of make nice as partners? Like, did anyone expect in the ecosystem that you were kind of, how was the line drawn between competition, the identity of Carbon6 amongst, Amazon seller tool builders, seeing you as competition versus seeing you as a potential partner? Was that ever an issue? Has that come up anecdotally?
There definitely is a line we we kind of have to skate through, which is, look, we've looked at all the different jobs, and there were certain jobs in which we saw immense competition early. Like, for example, pay-per-click advertising. So we have different advertising tools, but when it comes to pay-per-click, we have not made a substantial investment, right? We saw that there were companies like, Techometrics and Quartile and, PackView and Sky and others. So there's a bunch of names I've listed that all have, solid bases. They're all good-sized companies that I think offer solid products for their customers.
Yeah.
And we said, look, we've limited resources. We're operating in a close to $9 billion industry, right? There's no company that has, more than 1% market share right now. So why should we bother fighting over 15% of the industry when the remaining 85% is there? Let us set up partnerships here, right? And so we started doing that. We partnered with ad agencies. We partnered with ad software companies, right? And we said that's a place where we can drive partnerships.
Then was there a services, have you built out a services arm of the company that helps clients find, solutions from partners and in that side of things? Or is it pretty much like you've got your software, and then where you have, where you don't have functionality on offer, but of best in class, you kind of just refer clients to them? Or
Yeah. So I think,
what does partnership mean to Carbon6, I should ask?
Yeah, I think, we generally partner with companies in areas that we don't do much in, right?
Yeah.
So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about, our focus is on the customer and making sure what we provide to them is best in class, and we provide them the support they need to drive their business.
Yeah.
So we have, customer success manager, or our folks from our sales team that are, speaking to our customers, whether they're potential future customers or existing customers on a regular basis. And we are speaking to them about their business and their trials and tribulations and what's going on day to day.
Yeah.
And if we hear that they're struggling with something, let's say ads, we will definitely refer them to one of our partners, or they're struggling with something that we don't do today.
Yeah.
And we have a partnership.
We
sort of have it be more of an organic.
But does you're figuring it out as you go along, but do the partnerships mean, is this in this classic kind of like a web world of saying this is like a referral fee kind of partnership?
A lot of that. So
we'll give you 15% if you give us 15%, and boom, now you have a partner. But I'm not saying you're doing it for the referral fee, but you do it also because that's the best in class tool that you want your customer to use because it's great.
So we do some of that for sure.
Or is it more baked in somehow?
Both. So I'd say that there's a multi-stage approach we're starting to take, right? And so we've definitely done referrals both ways. We actually drive a significant amount of inbound from referrals from partners and affiliates and others, right? And we refer to other partners, right? For different things, specifically niche jobs, and niche services, because we don't build services, right?
Okay.
But if a seller gets suspended, right, then we know a couple of groups that do that, and we'll immediately refer to those groups, right?
By suspended, tell us, for anyone who's listening that's not a seller on Amazon, this means that the Amazon has said, hey, you can't sell anymore.
Yep.
On Amazon.
Yeah, you've done something wrong in terms of service, or there's a whole litany of things.
And it's oh my God, my whole business is up in flames. Yeah. What do I do? That's a big freak out.
And I think that's obviously at the extreme end. There's other things like, okay, we're going to start suppressing a specific item that you sell because it's low on inventory. There's a whole bunch of.
We had this happen to us yesterday on this platform called Tag Venue. So, it's not a great source of revenue, but all these marketplaces for listing meeting and event spaces have blossomed in the last few years. Now they're all dying, but same kind of thing. In the pandemic, they raised a bunch of money because the idea was that hey, why operate space when we can just list it and make money from both ends, the client and the listing or party space. But and then these marketplaces basically have such tight restrictions on owning the relationship on both ends, because they feel that if that's threatened, then who are they, and they're not necessary, because all of the vendors on their marketplace are selling direct to client anyway.
Got it. Yeah.
And instead of trying to strengthen the relationships between the two parties and act as like you're adding value, aside from just saying you're looking for this, I'll put you together, now give me my money. And it's a new reality. I feel like if you're a broker of anything in the modern digital reality, you have to provide unique, value aside from just brokerage if you want a lasting relationship with the both parties. If it's just transactional for the per transaction, then you have to be ready for the two parties to like be friends aside from your relationship and cut you out in the future. But if you're adding value that is lasting, that's there. So at least this happened to us yesterday, where it was like they kicked us off of this one marketplace because I kept sending leads my Calendly, because their platform only allows for like not even threaded messaging, but like a really crappy, text and not image, like just communication with the lead. Yeah. And so we get these inquiries where someone's like, okay, I'm planning this session for 150 people and we need like 7 rooms. But the listing came in, or the inquiry came in through a single listing for one 10% boardroom. So I'm like, cool, let's talk about it. And then the platform's like, you can't talk about it. And it's like, well, how can I help the customer then? Yeah. And then you get kicked off the listing. Then you explain to them and they're like, okay, well, don't do it again. I'm like, you didn't learn from this. Anyway, so I feel their pain. So you help these people by referring them to solution providers.
So that's part of it.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, another part of it is like we've thought through our solutions in terms of how best to integrate them into other people's products, right? And so we have a bunch of our partners carrying parts of their solution stack saying powered by Carbon6. And so it's kind of become a little branding piece where, they historically, people would have wanted to ask for something like a white label from a company like us for different
You'd be
parts.
OEM, you'd be brandless.
But because we are out there sponsoring every event and meeting everybody in the community, and we're known to be a brand in the space, it actually adds credibility now.
Sure.
So partners
Interesting.
will put powered by Carbon6 on the piece of their thing that we're doing for them. And that's a key part. And I'd say over time, like we spent a lot of time building our central product. And so a big part of this has been bringing everything together under one roof, the data architecture that underlies that, and also the central front-facing product. Now, that central front-facing product, over time, we're building out a partner piece there so we can start referring. I'd say that will be step 3 to the partner journey, right? With the first 2 pieces I mentioned kind of now already firmly in place.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an exciting evolution of what we can do to support our customers.
But this idea, because it was part of your vision in the beginning, is like harmonizing the software that you're acquiring, right? Yeah. So how's that been going?
So
have you had to rebuild everything from scratch?
No. So that's really interesting. I think not too long ago we were doing like a company kickoff here in Toronto, and I was sort of gave a talk about the history of the company. And I pulled out, I think, like the first deck that we ever made. Mm-hmm. And even in that deck, we had sort of talked about building Carbon6 in phases. It was like the M&A and sort of get a bunch of solutions together. Then around cross-selling to the customer base and sort of being, one Carbon6. And then the third was sort of around the data and providing additional insights and value to the customer beyond sort of just being able to do sort of individual point solutions.
Yeah.
What's actually been really interesting through the journey is, we've taken a lot of, twists and turns, shift from M&A to growth driven by market and partnerships, etc. But the grand vision and the phases have not really changed.
Okay.
And so, that was kind of interesting, sort of that, despite sort of all these paths, the general direction that we've taken is the same. And we're still in part of that journey. Now, going back to that sort of third phase of, data and insights, that's what we've been sort of building behind the scenes as well, as I talked about consolidating the sales team and all of that, one Carbon6.
Yeah.
What we didn't do is rebuild everything, because that would be very, very resource intensive and not really get us there. What we've built is actually the central sort of spine architecture that allows all of these different products that we've bought at slightly different tech stacks, there's similarities, but some different, to plug into that central spine.
Okay.
Off central spine of data.
Yeah.
Off single sign-on, like you can sign on as a Carbon6 customer and access any of our products.
Yeah.
Single authorization, in terms of you authorize Amazon to give Carbon6 its data, which then can get federated. Unified billing, and sort of all these sort of central systems is what we've centralized. And that's sort of done 2 things for us. First, it allowed us to connect all these different point solutions centrally to Carbon6.
Right. For the user story. Like the user story feels synonymous.
Harmonious. Harmonious, unified. So that's sort of part 1. So it allowed us to do that very resource efficiently and without sort of rebuilding everything, as you said. But a nice byproduct of building it that way is we've gotten an architecture that allows us for new things that we buy to connect in very quickly.
Sure.
So it's not, even if you were to build everything from scratch, right? If you start and you build your own product and then you build another module, then you build another module, then you build another module, your architecture is probably determined by sort of you built something and you added things to it.
Yeah, there's a lot more scalable.
It's much more monolithic.
Yeah.
It's monolithic. So if you do M&A, it's much harder to plug that in from a tech perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because we started with M&A and had to, in a world where we didn't want to rebuild everything, we needed an interesting and unique way of building the central structure that could connect all of these.
Mm-hmm.
We've built a central structure that, when we buy our next company and the next company, the integration is much faster and simpler.
Yeah.
And so we see that as one of sort of the core pieces of IP and strength that we've built over the last little bit.
And the speed of the business thereafter is also way faster, right? Like a big thing people always think about in tech M&A, right, is tech debt. And
is
tech debt, right? And so
tech debt.
So
Okay.
if you're like if you have a code base, like a lot of the companies that we might look at in our that we are looking at in our next phase of M&A, are companies that have been around for a few years, right? Because Amazon largely opened its APIs. So its APIs have been open for a while, but it largely made its APIs more accessible to developers in 2017 and 2018.
Right.
And that was to some extent a response to Shopify having a whole app ecosystem around its products, and the fact that Amazon hadn't done much to support the sellers, and sellers were having to hack their way into doing different things. So they said, look, let's make our APIs more accessible. Let's, incent and support this channel. And now they've done a really good job, opening up and allowing third-party developers and really working to, with groups like us to help make that ecosystem thrive. But that ecosystem started to develop around then. So a bunch of companies started, right? Some took up venture funding, others, have just kind of, been scaling up for a number of years. Now, with that comes layers and layers of code, right?
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, right, given that you've got lots of different people developing,
Yeah.
that code base starts, becoming harder and harder to move and pivot because there's just all these layers built by all these different people, right? And so when we think about the architecture that Kazi's describing, what it allows us to do is think, well, we've got this great front end of this tool. It's got a great set of capabilities, right? But a large chunk of the back end of that solution can be removed, and we plug into our central data system, right?
Yeah.
Because we've got the central data warehouse that is getting into all of Amazon's APIs, right? And now adding all of Walmart's APIs and so forth, right? And so we're pulling all of this data, right? And so what we're buying when we buy a solution, we're buying a front end, we're buying a customer base, we're buying some industrial logic, right? And then we are now plugging that in. Now it's not as simple as what I've just described, but what I've described really simplifies the process of M&A, and it simplifies the the go forward, which allows us to move way faster in running these businesses.
Let's talk about the composure of the team. Your 140 people. Like, how does it break down as an organization into different business units?
Yeah. So we do it more functionally than sort of different business units or different products. And that's part of sort of the consolidation aspect that we've talked about. There's a centralized operations team that, works with the sort of manages all our data, project management, et cetera. There's, central finance team, central HR, people team, recruiting team.
Okay.
The go-to-market is all centralized. So there's a, sales team, there's a customer success team.
Yeah.
The sales team is going out and sort of bringing new customers in. Customer success is making sure the customers that are brought in have success.
Right.
And after success, sort of, see how we can continue to help them. If there are additional products of Carbon6, we can offer them. Additional partner products, we can offer them. And so on. And the reason we did it this way, it keeps going back to, we are organizationally one Carbon6 that works with an individual customer to see what's best for them. And we didn't see that being possible if we had a, to name some of the companies that we bought, a seller investigators team and a ChargeGuard team and a Pixelme team, because then this team would focus on what this
Of course.
point solution could do for the customer,
Yeah.
versus what this team could do, what this team could do.
It sounds to me though that like this kind of like unified corporate identity and services structure, you had to sell yourselves on that as you went through the acquisition path. Because I have this question, I'm sure for a lot of the people watching this who are thinking about this idea of growth through acquisition.
Yeah.
Is like, how do you, like, look, it's only been a couple of years. How do you this quickly harmonize, even if the seller, well,
Yeah.
let's take a step back, okay? So typically, the companies that you bought have had how many staff? What's the range? 1 to 10?
A couple
20
more. Yeah.
Yeah, 20.
Okay, 1 to 20
25.
people
Yeah.
maintaining their things. And of course, it becomes sort of like fiefdom as they harmonize and you integrate. You know, you're going to have some churn. You're going to have like some people that are redundant because now can they play in this larger space and all this stuff. But I guess the question is, how did you negotiate that transition
Yeah.
as you started acquiring those companies and learning, you know, what are the tough things to do with harmonizing teams, centralizing processes, and doing it at this rapid scale?
Yeah. I think I'll sort of answer in two parts. First, just general structure of
Yeah.
company, right? If you think about growing through acquisition, I'm going to oversimplify it, but there's sort of really two ways
Okay.
you can go.
Okay.
One way is, you buy a business just for the business and its money and its financials. And then what you work on is stripping out cash, maybe growing it a bit. And what you're doing is, okay, this business is generating cash. You accumulate cash for a while. You use that cash to buy another business, generate cash, use that cash to buy another business. That's just a portfolio model, more typical, just pure private equity type model.
Totally, yeah.
The other model which is sort of the path we took. You consolidate and you sort of run it as a company. If you try to do something in between, it gets really difficult. So you kind of have to decide which way. And from the beginning, our view was sort of in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is what we always knew is, version A, you are kind of industry agnostic. You can sort of buy a business and you're buying it just for the cash.
Yeah.
In option B, which is sort of what we were, it's your focus on the customer. Like, do all the businesses that I buy serve the same customer?
Of course, yeah.
And so as we honed in on that, focused on that, the jobs to be done, the businesses you buy become more like product lines than separate businesses.
Sure.
And so that's sort of how we've seen. And that's where, whereas in option A, your differentiator is how much cash you can get out of these businesses to buy more businesses.
Right.
In option B, it's all about how you can harmonize the product, how you can harmonize the customer list, how you can cross-sell, how you can upsell, how you can serve the customer better. And so that was always sort of our vision from day one. And that's sort of what we've been focused on, executing on.
Yeah.
Now, going to your second question, like, you're buying these businesses that have been individual businesses.
Right.
And how do you sort of get them into the full sort of Carbon6 story and Carbon6 fold? And really, it starts with, and I'll say, we started building the team here. Instead of when we were hiring new people and when we got started, it was a conscious decision that we're not hiring a sales rep for Seller Investigator or sales rep for PixelMe. It's a Carbon6 salesperson, Carbon6 account manager, and so on.
Yeah.
To drive sort of multiple different products. And we started with a couple of products. And that, we focused on, Seller Investigators and a few others in the beginning. And then what that showed is once we started building up that team, you could see the impact it was having on the individual business and how fast we were able to grow them and how, we were able to take customers from other products and sell them into this one and vice versa.
But you kept the operating teams for those acquired companies the same?
So I think that if you think about the businesses that we bought, there's some operating team. There's usually a founder who's a subject matter expert.
Right.
There's, maybe a couple of customer support folks and a couple of devs and so on. And I think sort of most of that, we kept and sort of some of it changed. But what I'm talking about, sort of this go-to-market and sort of customer-focused team, we built like a consolidated team.
Totally, yeah.
And then as the founding teams and the operating teams sort of saw the benefits of the centralized Carbon6 functions, that's what really creates the buy-in, because you say, hey, we're stronger together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could try and sort of be my own sort of fiefdom. But actually, hey, I'm looking sort of around and sort of other business in the Carbon6 portfolio. Look at how fast they're growing because they're incorporating and part of this consolidated umbrella.
I always thought of it like the approach would be, okay, so I'm buying 10 different software tools that are all now going to be part of the same suite. I want to centralize a bunch of stuff in that functional stack, but also in our approach to market, our go-to-market. And tell that story to the clients, the existing kind of customer base of each of these companies. My approach would definitely be some form of, cultural mesh where I want all the operating teams, if we're going to keep them, if they're competent and they fit the profile of our main operating mandate, to come on board. If Carbon6 was my company and I acquired XYZ, XYZ would come on board. Forget about the HR mechanics, but they would hire into Carbon6 and get paychecks from Carbon6. And, totally assume that functional product into the mothership. But it kind of sounds like there was like a little bit in between where you kept those different products operating with their product team.
Well, I guess if you think about our evolution as a company, I think when we spoke with you last, we were about a year into e-commerce. And so we were a year into Amazon, right? We were.
You mean you guys individually just like learning about this?
We're learning.
Yeah.
Like we're entrepreneurs. We just dove into the space.
Right.
And we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so all of the functional knowledge on our team early was coming from the people in these acquired businesses.
Yeah, that's
right?
interesting. Yeah.
And so what we were doing early was we deliberately overemphasized the importance of surrounding ourselves with people that had been there before, done it before within our space, so that we always had that knowledge at the table, right? And so like that was just a central way that we thought about this problem is like, look, we know how to build businesses. We've done things in other spaces. We don't know this space, so let's get that around us.
Yeah.
As we built the central team, we started developing very quickly institutional knowledge on how to do things, how to operate. Our knowledge of the space ramped up, not just as individuals, but as a company and as a team, right? And so now, especially given this number of data points we have, which is greater than most companies in the space, given the number of tools we have and the impact we're having in the space, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of insight. We have a lot of understanding. Like we've literally just launched 2 new products over the past couple months that'll both be 7-figure ARR businesses this year.
But those are also those are developed internally. Those aren't M&A based, right?
Internally developed solutions, right? And so now we're no longer just buying; we're also launching our own products because we know what to do, right? And so the viewpoint we're able to take, and so we always came in with the viewpoint that we had to achieve what Kazi was describing, because you couldn't. Like you had to make a choice, right? You couldn't do both of these models, and trying to be somewhere in between would be a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
And so we had to be integrated. It was just about how we get there.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. But it's been a quick timeline on all of this. And you said what? Revenue is 7x in the last couple of years?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So let's talk about this kind of like perspective as founders on the capital growth expectation, from, so I guess the source of capital growth from the beginning versus now. So if you're standing on your own 2 feet and you're revenue based, you're making money, you're making profit, and you're comfortable in your identity for that, how does that compare against what the expectations were from day one? Like day one, were you going to just like raise, amalgamate, public market, IPO, chill? Like what was the goal in the beginning in terms of like your commitment to the company versus now?
Yeah.
Are you entrenched, but happily so?
I would say, no one should start a company without thinking that one day it would be revenue based and have income and
totally
be profitable.
Yeah.
Like you should always do that, and so did we. I think, when we were last talking, right, our view would be more eminent. Let's just say, I talked about the 3 phases that I laid out in sort of the first deck.
Yeah.
I think our view was the M&A would go like much longer, and then there would be more overlap between the building and buying, and
Right.
sort of longer path. I think, because the market's changed, we sort of, dialed down M&A quite a bit.
Yeah.
Focused a lot more on consolidation, growing revenue, getting to profitability.
Yeah.
I think it actually has made us a lot stronger company than what we had originally envisioned.
Yeah.
Because, we are at a pretty high level of revenue now. We're profitable, and we're growing at over 100% a year just organically. So we can sort of keep going down that path.
Yeah.
I think so we're looking at sort of where we go from here. We see some interesting M&A opportunity to sort of really ramp up growth, provide more solutions to our customers.
How does it relate to your cap table though? In that way, like if early on you brought on investors, right, that were looking at this kind of infinite scale question, is it, and again, I don't know what it looks like and how many owners there are in the company or anything, but is it such a situation as, the company would hopefully be buying back equity to, double down on its revenue story? Or is it the sort of thing where investors are happy with the current state and they're saying, wow, well, we don't need to worry about scale because it's comfortable. The company's growing naturally.
I think we're very fortunate in that I think we have a very, primarily very long-term focused investor base. Like the group that led our Series A, right? They're like, that happened a couple of years ago,
Right.
And it's a multi-year fund life, and so they're not coming to us and saying there's any pressure to do anything. They're really saying, you guys go do what's right for the business, right? And if you guys go do what's right for the business, then everything else follows. And so we're not really thinking about things like buying back at this point, because when you think about like a share buyback from the company's funds, right, rather than from an investor coming in and buying some of that, that's a use of funds, right, that could go into other things. And so when you've got a business where you're growing over 100% per year and you've got great M&A opportunities out there, like you're constantly having to look at multiple opportunities that are all very exciting.
Sure.
And then force yourself to choose where to put that dollar. And it's really hard to ever justify a buyback or anything like that when you can do that, which will typically create more economic value for your shareholders. If we vision forward 5 years though, and we've, really conquered this market and we're 10x bigger than we are, 20x bigger than we are today, and we feel like the best thing is that rather than raising to do something else or in reinvesting our capital to do something else, then we probably think about that. But we are in this really fortunate position now where we're saying, okay, well, as Kazi was saying, what does this market look like? We had this original vision, and Kazi was mentioning the deck. Like we always laugh because we look at the revenue numbers that in the early deck, and we hit the revenue numbers.
Yeah.
And they were kind of crazy revenue numbers, but we hit them in a totally different way. Like we thought we were going to go buy this revenue. We've actually done it organically.
Yeah.
And now we're saying, well, let's go buy some revenue again, because if we can do this organic thing,
Keep scaling it.
like we might be,
exponentially.
we can do some really exciting things here.
Man, that's cool.
Exciting times.
Huh?
Exciting times.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I got to ask this because career-wise, individually, leading up to this company, right? So you met each other as consultants, right? Is that what it was?
Business
Or
school.
school.
Business school.
Business school.
And then after that, what did you guys do?
So similar-ish paths. We were both consultants. So like
Right.
Kazi was at BCG, I was at McKinsey.
Yeah.
What the consulting companies will do is they'll make you an offer to go to business school, and they'll pick up the tab for the business school if you go back for a couple of years.
Yeah, indentured labor.
Indentured labor. And so, at the time, I was not somebody that could afford a couple $100,000 bill for my education.
Yeah.
And so went right back and paid off the business school debt. And who knows, today being a little bit more of a risk taker, maybe I would have done things differently, but I'm happy I did things the way I did and went back and did that. And then been building startups ever since.
Yeah, that's a very similar story, right? I was at BCG, went back for I think about 3 years after business school,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably the same as you, I think. Since then, been building my own businesses, that's what.
But was this so? This was not the first company that you guys were individually, but had been founders of.
No.
Okay, so how many companies before this have you founded?
So 2 more. Two more. So I think the first one was in the clean tech space. Did that for a number of years. That company's still going, has its own CEO. I'm just in the board right now.
Okay.
The second one was in the mental health space, where we were buying mental health clinics across the U.S. and sort of layering on some additional services onto it. Ended up selling that business in 2021, just as we started Carbon6. And our third partner, Justin, who's
the man at the beach.
Yeah, exactly. He was an investor in that business. So that's how he and I know each other.
Okay.
So we got started with Carbon6. I still, in that same talk I was giving in the company about the history, I have a calendar invite in my personal calendar, I think March 2021, saying Kazi Justin Amazon chat. So that's sort of how it got started. We incorporated in April of 2021 and sort of been running. Nassim was doing a different business at that time. He had left and then sort of joined Carbon6 September, October,
something like that. Like,
how would it? Okay, so there's founder history, but it's interesting that this being, of course, new territory, but also capital intensive kind of play, right?
Yeah.
With this business, at what point did it go from? This is so corny the way it'll come out of my mouth. Okay, but going from I won't say it cornily, but like going from like the oh shit to the to the I'm actually excited about this.
Well, I think we're always excited.
Yeah.
Like
excited, but with trepidation in the beginning, perhaps like after first raise, because
if you kind of come into like where we were when we were sitting here before, I still think it was a guys with the dream phase.
Okay.
So like there was a guys with the dream phase, which was like looking at the industry. Okay, it's massive. Looking at the problems that were needing to be solved and saying, I like these problems. Like we're helping entrepreneurs. This is exciting. Like we've all faced these problems.
Sure.
Looking at like the fragmentation of the space and saying, wow, there's opportunity, right? And that's kind of what we were saying. And we were putting up these decks and saying, we're really hardworking and reasonably smart. And we can go
reasonably smart.
And like we can go out and do this thing,
sure
right?
Thing, yeah.
And we had these decks and we'd go pitch the investors and we'd go buy the businesses, and we were doing this on repeat for a while. And I don't think that we really had a business until we started building the central function here, actually.
Right.
Like a year and a half into the company, like we realized that, now was the time. There was a big opportunity. We had a couple solutions that we thought we could make into best in class in the industry. Let's double down. And then for those first few months, it was us believing that we had it. So like before anybody else in the market would believe we'd done it, like we believed we had it, we'd done it. This thing was working. Now we needed to lean in and focus. And that was like, it took us from just being excited about the opportunity to being exuberant about the business we were building.
Sure.
And really building that out and making it work and thinking about all the different dynamics. And we started pulling in everybody that we knew to come and do this with us.
Yeah.
And we emerged over the past few months now. We talk about that startup kind of journey. I think we will always call ourselves a startup.
Right.
Because I think, to your point, if we're not a startup,
what are you?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's always, exactly. There's always growth and there's always like new stuff happening.
Yeah, totally.
But we've emerged into the scale-up phase of a business where we are no longer thinking about, well, what are we doing? Or are we going to survive?
Yeah.
It's now about saying, there's this thing, it's really exciting. A lot of different directions we can take it. These directions are working today. What are additional things we can do? How can we maximize the opportunity for our employees? How can we maximize the opportunity for our investors? How can we make this really a special place to work and the type of company that people will who work with us day to day will look back on and say, wow, I worked there. That was awesome. I made my best friends there. I made set up relationships with people who I respect so much that I want to found businesses with them in the future. Yeah. Right. And that's what we're working on today.
Top Hat.
Exactly what we did at Top Hat, right?
Everyone I've met that worked at Top Hat kind of knows each other, and it's like a whole right. There's all these companies like that in the pantheon of Canadian, I don't know, scale-ups.
It was cool. Like we, from our Top Hat teams, when we were here before, we hadn't had the Top Hat crew join us yet, but literally within the month after speaking with you, we brought on board our chief operating officer, Moomin. Moomin and I worked together for years at Top Hat, like both on the exec team there, and had, I knew Moomin's capabilities, and the guy's like a total rock star. And he was like the type of guy who, like, there are very few people who are going to be up to the challenge of buying this many businesses and putting it all together.
Yeah.
Like, that was the guy. I was like, all right, we need this guy in here. And then with Moomin in here, we started saying, okay, well, who else are we going to add? So there were people like, Lynette and George, who are VPs on our team, who, like, Lynette leads our ops function, and George's our VP of engineering, and people who we'd worked with in the past. And, a number of our sales directors have come in, right? And we just kind of thought about our networks and who the right people were based on, the job that needed to be done. And, we feel very fortunate to have, met them through that type of journey. And so I think
propagating that.
Here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Super exciting. And especially, again, like, I know it seems like a long time from the operator's mindset, but it's not long.
It's not long, no.
Dude, like 2-3 years, and you're at this place where it's like, yeah, we're building a culture. Everyone loves it. It's going to be great. That's wicked, dude. To get past that point of
Totally.
questioning the existential angst that's involved with founding something new. Not just product market fit, but like, is it worth it, and is it fulfilling to the people involved? And you tick that, and you're good. That's super cool. So, if there's things that you guys would say you're really excited about coming out of or looking ahead at the whole space that you're in, e-commerce could be the super meta, or otherwise, Amazon. Are there any big trends that are like emerging that are exciting in terms of new functional opportunities for sellers, or in terms of things that the platform is enabling? Yeah. Or even just, I don't know, like opportunities in the market as, Amazon grows globally?
Yeah. I can talk a little bit and add on after, but obviously, e-commerce isn't going away anywhere. It's growing everywhere, and then it's growing faster and faster every year. So
you're just speaking to that because of the contraction post-COVID, right? Is that why you said that?
No, I mean, like, contraction post-COVID feels like a contraction because it was like, a year over a year. But as Naseem said,
yeah, the trend is up.
Trend is significantly up and to the right, right? And within that, the space where we play is more the marketplaces, the Amazons, Walmarts of the place.
Right.
That's sort of increasing its share.
Yeah.
More and more big brands are coming into these marketplaces. There was an announcement recently, like Nike had stepped away from Amazon for a bit, but they're back. They're selling in Amazon again. Obviously, e-commerce isn't going away anywhere. It's growing everywhere, and then it's growing faster and faster every year. So
you're just speaking to that because of the contraction post-COVID, right? Is that why you said that?
No, I mean, like, contraction post-COVID feels like a contraction because it was like, a year over a year. But as Naseem said,
yeah, the trend is up.
Trend is significantly up and to the right.
What's an example?
I mean, the AI is obviously the big one. So like, giving an example, right? Amazon is changing their search a little bit. Before, where you would search for, specific keywords and say, like, running shoes, white. Now they're starting to do AI related searches like, hey, I'm going running in this kind of climate in 1 month. What type of shoes should I look for? And then the search results come from there. Right. And so as those types of changes happen, how do you think about advertising in that kind of context? How do you think about
keyword
SEO
optimization
in that? So all these kinds of super interesting challenges that, challenges and sort of opportunities that will come, being able to be part of that, in the forefront of that, is super exciting. And I think, if we look at our space, despite being very young, I would say Carbon6 has become sort of one of the premier companies in that space. Mm-hmm. And so I think we've earned the right to be at the forefront of solving some of these issues for our customer. And so that's a very exciting place to be.
And our partners, right? So, like, I'd say our biggest global partner in most ways is Amazon, right? Like, so the Amazon relationship is something that's very important to us. Like, our CTO is literally meeting with their tech team. Like, he's down at their offices almost every month. He's literally meeting them all the time and thinking about the future of Seller Central, right? Cool. And so they're thinking through these problems, and, they start consulting us on these problems, right? And I think one of the great opportunities for us, start focusing on Amazon first, right, is, as they're developing, we can have a hand in shaping that and really thinking about the problems that we're solving for sellers, and how we can help and support and augment the experience in Seller Central, so that we can make sure that our customers are better set up in the future, which helps them and it helps us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And over time, right, like I think that there's a big opportunity for us to do that across the board, right? Like we think that the deep Amazon relationship is key. Our sellers are oftentimes talking to us about things like Walmart and TikTok and other capabilities and channels. And so it's really like the thing that gets us jazzed up is how deep we can go with Amazon. Number one, in terms of us now being embedded versus just having a bunch of tools that are helping people that sell on Amazon.
Yeah,
and
you're
then
not guesstimating on the destination of the platform. You're actually having a hand in
shaping
shaping it and offering your clients direct access to it, right?
Totally.
Huge thing, right?
Yeah.
And then the other second thing that I think I'm really excited about. So there's how we do that, and then there's how we follow our customers,
Right.
And our customers are always going to be super Amazon centric, because Amazon is the giant in the room, right? Amazon is the everything marketplace. Everything's there. But there are a number of other marketplaces that people use. Even if Amazon is 70% of the marketplace volume in the Western world, there's still a long tail of other stuff.
Sure.
I think there's an opportunity for us to go out and help our customers do those other things and make sure that the experience for them across their channels is unified, right? And so those are the problems that get us excited about the future, from like AI and developments and innovation to how we partner with Amazon to how we expand the set of things we can do with our customers and really help them be successful.
Sell everywhere.
Yeah.
Easily.
Totally.
Nice.
Yeah.
Last couple questions are about where you're based, because I know that at some point we had conversations talking about Toronto, and I think like maybe a year, I don't know when it was, a year or 2 years, a year and a half ago, it seemed like consensus was that, maybe we don't need to grow our main base or have an office in Toronto. The idea is remote. I don't know if Kazi said that at some point. I feel like I had a conversation. So Toronto, in terms of office centricity for the culture of the organization, like what equals question mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think even last time we spoke, we were very bullish on building in Toronto. We continue to be the same way.
Yeah.
We had to move out of the Starwell campus to get a bigger office. We're getting an even bigger one.
You're growing out of the Peter Street location, or you're growing in that building?
We're just growing into the full
space. Because there's a lot of vacancy in that building, right?
There is.
Yeah, there is, unfortunately. I think one of the things we look at, there's two pieces to your question, right? There's a question around like Toronto.
Toronto is a city to build a company in.
And then second question is around like, remote versus on-site and so on.
Sure, it's like how do you build a hybrid reality? Yeah.
So I think the way we think about it, we see Toronto as being an incredible city to build in, fantastic engineering talent, great sales talent, right, very near, right across the border from our biggest market. And so, we've really focused our hiring in Toronto.
Okay.
I think we probably have, 80, 90 people in Toronto of the 140 right now. And sort of, if I look at our hiring plan, a vast majority of that, we're primarily focused in Toronto.
Yeah.
And there's, for all the reasons I mentioned around talent and so on, we also want to actually create a culture. Now, we don't necessarily ask everyone to come in every day, but we do put a lot of emphasis on in-office events and getting people together. Because one of the things we've noticed is, from a culture perspective, it's fantastic. When you're winning together and sort of you're getting to know people. One of the things we value as a leadership team, what Nassim was talking about is making sure people make connections here that they keep for life, and they sort of, in the future look back to and say, these were special years of my life.
Right.
And some of the ways to make that connection, you can try that online, but being in the same space is definitely helps.
Yeah.
And so even for people that don't come in every day, we will have every quarter some sort of big event for the company that
nice. And fly people
in and so on.
Nice.
And sort of get people together.
That's here in Toronto that you host it?
Usually, yeah, almost always.
Because the bulk of people's here.
Of people here.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is, we have a lot of people who are starting out their careers or maybe only a few years in the career. And one of the things we want to make sure we focus on is learning and development and sort of growing in your careers. And a lot of that, there's training and so on, but a lot of that really happens by working with others and the apprenticeship model and learning from others who are maybe a couple of years more experienced than you, and sort of you work with them.
Yeah,
so you want to make sure we create those opportunities by creating a space that people can come to and people are excited to come to.
That's awesome. In terms of geography being relevant for offices in proximity to clients, that's probably not even a consideration because you've got clients everywhere, right? Like
we got clients everywhere. I mean, if you like, I would say a big segment in U.S. obviously.
Yeah.
And within the U.S., big groups in like New York and Florida and so on. So, being in Toronto is very close to all of them. Major international airports, you can fly anywhere you need to, like one stop. So from a location perspective, Toronto is great. From a talent perspective, and it's been a fantastic place to grow.
We think that Toronto is always going to be our HQ. It's always going to be the biggest office. We will have global offshoot offices, like we have a presence in China, right? That we're really excited about.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
like a physical office in China.
Yeah, that's right.
So
what? Where's your office in China?
In Shenzhen.
What?
Yeah.
When did that open?
I guess like a few months ago, like kind of second half of last year, we started getting it going, and then now we've got over 10 people there now, right? A dozen people there.
Have you been?
We both want to go and haven't gotten to it yet. Maybe this fall is kind of the plan. But we have a team of people that are constantly going. Like we've got sales managers going, like BD people going. Like there's a constant rotation of people from here that are going and supporting, enabling the team there.
Yeah.
So that's been really exciting to see that grow. We just opened up an office in Belfast. So we have people kind of all let's say we do 2/3, 3/4 of our hiring in Toronto. We try to do it all, but I try to do it all for kind of like the junior roles. But then for the senior roles, oftentimes we just look for the best person available, right? And so we'll hire in different places. We also have this diaspora of people that are actually located in different places where they can be helpful, right? Like our CRO is based in Boston, right? And there are other companies in our ecosystem that are there, right? So when there's a partner meeting to be had with them, maybe he goes, right? So we can we have people that are based in Utah, for example, a big community of sellers. So that they can kind of go and do the seller meetups and all that stuff. So it just so happens that some of the stuff has happened organically, but we're huge believers in Toronto, and we both chose obviously to make this our homes.
Right.
We picked Startwell to get started because
thank you.
Obviously the two of us knew each other before, and I was like, Qasim's a great guy. We'll set up here, and it's it's near our homes, and it's where we love to be, right? And we've grown, and our new office is again walking distance for us. We like to be downtown. We like to be in the city and embedded in everything that's going on here. And we think that people who tech professionals like that. Yeah. And that's what people want to be part of. And a lot of the people that choose to come work with us are people that are in their, first few gigs, first 10, first 15 years of their work experience. And they're excited about coming into the city and being here. And so, we like being part of the fabric of that.
Nice. No, and it's funny because in the last couple of years Startwell has been transitioning out of providing office space anyway, right? So it's cool that you guys were one of the last companies to be resident at Startwell as you formed the company. And now even the way that I'm positioning our brand is we're very much in line with this idea of enabling teams to gather in the core of the city or the downtown Toronto because of the experience that you have when you collaborate in the city. Totally. You go out for whatever team building stuff in the evening. You got your restaurant, pedestrian life,
exactly.
And so now we're a destination for meetings and events. That's our primary function. The media stuff's secondary to it. And we built out a whole studio model to produce content when people come together.
Mm-hmm. Super cool.
And that's, so it's very interesting that we both share that value for Toronto being a kind of a gathering place for working teams. Nice. Totally. Right on, guys. Well, it was great catching up again. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to have this chat in the next 2 years.
2 years, yeah. 2 years from now, we'll see where
when you're at like 7,000 people. But it's very exciting to hear that both the ecosystem around your company is growing, the company itself is growing, and that you found this like happy place in revenue. And you have clarity on kind of like your comfort zone with the company. That's cool.
Appreciate it.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Good stuff.
Cheers.